Today we'll go back in time to the late 18th century when Britain's newest and harshest penal colony was established on the sunburned shores of Australia. In spite of everything, a young inmate named Mary Bryant persevered in this remote community. She defied the odds and survived being transported across the world for a minor offense. Yet, she was born into poverty in Cornwall. Come along as we learn how Mary, a convicted convict, became a legendary heroine thanks to her dogged determination, which led to one of the most audacious escapes in Australian colonial history. As a young woman from Cornwall, England, caught in the harsh reality of the late 18th century, Mary Broad, subsequently known as Mary Bryant, was far from being a maritime legend. Mary was born into poverty in the rough fishing communities of Cornwall around 1765. Her family struggled to meet their basic needs. She learned early on to survive harsh winters and scarce food, just like many others in that part of England. She had to be strong every day because there weren't many opportunities for women in her position. In the hands of those who are hungry or desperate, even small-scale thefts can bring down the entire legal system. That was the end for Mary. She was tried, found guilty, and given a 7-year transportation sentence for stealing a cloak, although some sources say it was food. The British government instituted this punishment as a means of alleviating prison overcrowding. Inmates were sent to faraway colonies and left to their own devices, something that Mary could never have foreseen was going to rip her life apart. In 1786, a filthy British prison transported Mary from her humble Cornish home, where she remained until her transfer. She hopped on a convict transport ship at the appointed hour and was whisked away to the prison colony in Australia, a country that was hardly known or cared about in England. It was a tough journey. Sickness, heat, and disease beset the exhausted pilgrims as they endured months at sea crammed into the ship's hold with many others. Over time, it became clear that the area they were about to encounter would be harder than the journey. Mary and the First Fleet transported hundreds of prisoners to the newly founded settlement at Sydney Cove in New South Wales in 1788. Built on stilts in the middle of undeveloped wilderness, the town was little more than a rough outpost. Both the officers and the inmates had to deal with a strange environment, strange animals, and scarce food. Rationing of food was severe. They made do with what they had. Because of the monumental change they represented to the destiny of the region, the indigenous inhabitants of the area viewed the newcomers with suspicion. An impassable ocean effectively locked Mary and her fellow inmates in a prison without walls. The inmates made an effort to maintain some level of normalcy despite the harsh circumstances. There was little delay in Mary's meeting with William Bryant, a seafaring Cornish fisherman. They became close through their common ancestry and found comfort in being with one another. One bright spot in their otherwise miserable lives was the 1788 approval of their marriage. They had a daughter, Charlotte, whom Mary gave birth to first, and then a son, Emmanuel. The small family suffered through malnutrition, sickness, and the savage work requirements imposed by the military commanders who oversaw the community. The possibility of obtaining an additional ration or two was William's pitiful compensation for his fishing abilities, but it seldom met their necessities. Mary was always considering her alternatives. Could they possibly bring up a family here in a colony where their very existence was always in jeopardy? An escape plan started to take shape as time went on. Inmates were not technically locked up in a regular prison, but the vastness of Australia's outback provided an effective deterrent. Only those well-versed in the terrain dared to travel deep into the vast and merciless bush. On the other hand, Mary and William were more at ease beside the water. William's expertise in fishing and navigation provided them with a glimpse of hope. In order to evade detection, they would need to locate or construct a boat. They plotted with a small circle of reliable inmates, hoping to either steal or build a ship strong enough to endure the perilous voyage across the Atlantic. Secrecy was essential for such an escape. As a lesson to others, the conspirators might be subject to severe whippings or perhaps death if caught. Guards watched as they scrounged for the few resources they could find. William studied the tides and explored the coast to find little nooks that might harbor boats while he fished. They hid their little supplies, including dry food, rope, and wooden boards for months. Tinkering in ways that wouldn't arouse suspicion, they fixed a small boat that had once belonged to the settlement's fishing activities. The specter of betrayal or exposure loomed over every stage of preparation. The crucial moment had come by March 1791. As the moon dipped below the horizon, Mary, William, their children, and a handful of other fugitives ducked into the darkness. With each stroke of the oars, their pulses raced as they stealthily made their way out of Sydney Cove. A quick and merciless chase would ensue if the soldiers beheld them. As soon as they were out of sight, they set up an improvised sail and steered north, following the shoreline. They then faced the difficult task of traveling more than 3,000 miles around the Great Barrier Reef to Dutch Timor, which is now part of Indonesia. Their plan was to pretend to be stranded seamen instead of escaped convicts. The vast ocean challenged all of their skills. Stormy winds pounded the vessel. As the storm approached, powerful waves loomed, ready to engulf them. Regrettably, rain was also essential for gathering fresh water, posing a dual challenge. While the relentless sun blistered their skin, other days went by in relative obscurity. Holding her children close, Mary protected them from the sea spray and severe weather as, in spite of her own dread, she whispered words of comfort to them. The little company finally made it to shore at Kupang, Timor, after a terrifying month-long journey. Tired, undernourished, but alive. They surrendered to the Dutch authorities, feigning shipwreck. The Dutch appeared empathetic first. The runaways were provided with nourishment, a safe haven, and medical treatment. It seemed like Mary's daring wager had been successful. Yet, the colony's authorities began to suspect foul play. Given the size of the ship, how had the survivors managed to reach their destination? Rumors made their way to Britain. It became clear very quickly that they were not hapless sailors, but rather inmates trying to escape the colony. The British wanted Mary and her companions arrested before they could come up with a new strategy. Their respite abruptly ended when they found themselves trapped between two colonial powers. Mary, William, and the other runaway prisoners were coerced into boarding a ship that would take them to England to face prosecution. As with any prisoner transport, the return voyage was rife with danger as sickness and starvation plagued the ship. Death befell each member of Mary's cherished family. William was sick first. As a result of the continual chaos and inadequate food, the youngsters were also exhausted. The passage was a tragically unsuccessful endeavor for them. Upon her return to England, Mary found that the once thriving mother and wife had lost almost all of her possessions. But even before she had escaped, word of her escape had circulated. The audience was captivated by the story of a young mother who fearlessly navigated unexplored waters alongside her children. Her incredible journey, dogged determination, and tragic losses endeared her to the British people, who looked up to her and wanted to know more about her. Since Mary was an escaped criminal, the legal system was prepared to punish her when she returned. But in certain powerful circles, the dramatic story of her journey had inspired compassion. Her predicament captivated the renowned biographer of Dr. Samuel Johnson, James Boswell. He advocated for Mary through letters and lobbying, painting her as a hopeless mother rather than a criminal. The public eye sided with Boswell's cause. Reports in the media portrayed Mary less as a reformed criminal and more as a sad heroine. Her incredible fortitude in the face of insurmountable obstacles changed public perception, and she became an inspiration as a result. A rare gesture that demonstrated how deeply her story had resonated, the authorities eventually pardoned her conditionally. Mary faded from public view after her release. Despite the gaps in her biography, it is widely thought that she sought solace in England after her ordeal at Australia's penal colony, where she had been subjected to brutality. It is unclear if she discovered a permanent sense of tranquility. Movies, plays, and books continued to honor Mary Bryant as a symbol of unwavering bravery, so her reputation endured. One of the most remarkable endurance accomplishments in early colonial Australia's history is her escape. She embodied a mother's unwavering determination to achieve independence for her children as she sailed thousands of miles on a tiny, leaky boat. Despite the tragic loss of her loved ones at the hands of the water, the indomitable spirit and fearlessness displayed by Mary are an inspiration. Mary Bryant's story resonates as it establishes a connection between two distinct realms. On the one hand, she was a prisoner, sent to serve time in a harsh foreign country for a little offense. On the flip side, she broke free from a life confined by chains and became an icon of the spirit. Her narrative exemplifies the power of adversity, optimism, and maternal love to motivate remarkable bravery. Many prisoners of conscience were able to remain anonymous during the colonial era of Australia. A daring escape by Mary, however, shattered that silence and exposed the intricacies of a system that could punish little infractions with enormous harshness. Her fight for freedom showed how, despite odds stacked against us, we can all find the strength to persevere. Along with other pioneers and trailblazers, Mary Bryant's name lives on in modern times. She was politically powerless, affluent, and privileged. Instead, she had a fierce love for her family and an unshakable refusal to yield.